Hey, call me Louis. This is my spot. Louis spot.
Show me a hell of a lot of evidence to convince me of something that everybody believes is true history. And he says, I said, I have to see these heads. He said, I have a few in my study. I said, that's not good enough. I have to be sure that they are valid, that you are now making this up. He was a little annoyed by that. He wanted to throw me out of the house. But nonetheless, I persisted. You have to prove this to me. I need to see sculptures of these people. And he says they're not in the big museums. They don't take chances like that in the big museums. You have to go to private collections. And the next day he started to take me to private collections, and I was utterly stunned. You would be surprised how much history is hidden in private museums. They don't allow these things in the big places. It's just like in Egypt. I am responsible for returning to the modern Egyptians the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin which Napoleon's army blew off. A friend of mine, Garland Roberts, an adventurer, he was in England. He went into the British Museum and he found that they had the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin. How he did that, but he's a fellow, he's a daredevil. He would risk his life just to prove a point. And I says, you go back there. I'm going to pay your way to Britain. You go back and photograph the damn thing. Pretend you are a, messenger boy, whatever it is. Get a job there. Get the damn thing. And he brought back startling pictures. And I called Sheikh Anta Diop, the head of the radiocarbon laboratory in Dakar. He's dead now. He was the leading African scientist. And I got in touch with him and I told him what had happened. And I got in touch with Gamal Abdel Mokhtar, the Arab delegate at UNESCO. Sheikh Anta was at UNESCO too. And I got in touch with, I told Garland Roberts, he has to be on the phone. And we started a conversation with the British Museum. And I started out by saying, sir, we understand and we have hard visual proof that you have the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin in your museum. And I have the Arab delegate at UNESCO here and the African delegate, etc. And we'd like to negotiate the return of the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin to the Egyptians. Now, Keika. Now, Van Sertima, we can't do that. See, most of the things we have in our museums come from all over the world. If we started returning things to this and that country, we'll have no museums. I said, sir, we're not asking you to destroy the museum. This is a specific object. This is a matter of the very gravest importance. I have on the line with me Gamal Abdel Mokhtar, the Arab delegate, Sheikh Anta Diop, the African delegate, myself, Garland Roberts, who has proof that they were the pieces. He photographed them. And he said, well, we will consider it. Do you know? Sheikh Anta spoke. I had a French translator. Sheikh Anta spoke. I spoke. Garland Roberts spoke. Do you know the Arab delegate? We're returning it to the bloody Arabs, He never said a bloody word. Because the Arabs are not Egyptian. Don't make any mistake about that. It's just like we are in this room here. This is America. It would be hard to find a Native American in this room. The world has changed dramatically. There have been half a dozen invasions of Egypt. The Persians, the Greeks, the Syrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs. That is not Egypt. Egypt is no longer Egyptian. They have not a damn thing to do with the building of the pyramids. We now have hard proof, very hard proof, that Egypt was African when the pyramids were built. There is no question about it. This is not guesswork. This is not theory. We found the skeletons in the ancient graves. We found sculptures, which you'll never see when you go to Egypt. They don't put those things on display. But now we have the hard proof. And I'll deal with that later. when we come to deal with the Egyptian section of this lecture. But I appeared before the Congressional Committee and I presented 12 witnesses, all European. Because they're going to say I'm Afrocentric if I show them this African said this. No, no, no. I'm going to take the very people that you think you will listen to. Columbus is the first person. I said, that's how I began. I'm not the first person to suggest there were Africans in America before Columbus. Christopher Columbus is the first person to say that. He actually says in the Journal of the Second Voyage that when he was in Haiti, Native Americans came to them and told them that black-skinned people had come from the south and southeast trading in gold-tipped metal spears. Columbus may or may not have believed, but he actually collected samples of these spears. They were sent back to Spain. They were meticulously, microscopically examined in Spain. And they were found to be identical, not just similar, identical with spears being forged in African Guinea. Of 32 parts, 18 were of gold, 6 of silver, and 8 of copper. Not only were they identical metallurgically, the words the Africans were using for these spears were the words the Americans were using. African word for gold, Ghana. That's why it's called Ghana. Gold Empire, the Golden Empire. And I checked it out in several African languages. Sarakole, Soninke, Gadzago, it's Kane. Vayan Mende, Kani. Kisi, it's Kani. Kono, it's Kanin. Fuel, it's Kane. That's the word for gold. And that's the word the Americans are using. And they have their own bloody gold word. Why are they using this strange word? And presenting material which, when checked out, when the metallurgists checked it out in Europe, they found the spears were identical in their ratio of gold, silver, and copper alloys. How could you have linguistic and metallurgical identities like that? It is utterly impossible. Not only that, I then went beyond that. I not just showed Columbus. Ferdinand wrote a book about his father, and he said, my father told me that he saw Negroes north of Honduras. Columbus knew what a so-called Negro looks like. He was in Africa. That's how my book began. Columbus sitting at a table in Africa, arguing with the Portuguese. I tracked this man down. It is possible when you become very famous, people could track every little thing. Who you slept with, who you tried to kill, who slept with your wife or your husband, everything. And one found a hell of a lot of stuff on this clown, or rather this villain. He did some horrible things. He's known as the Great Discoverer. Ferdinand said, my father told me he saw Negroes north of Honduras. He not only heard of them in Haiti, he actually saw them north of Honduras. Vasco Nunez de Balboa, on September the 25th in the year 1513, I've got it down to the day. He's coming down the slopes of Paracu in Darien, which we now call Panama. And he and his men saw 2 tall black men among the Native Americans. They are startled. They haven't brought no black people there. Several of them commented it. Peter Martyr said they must have been shipwrecked. Then he also said they were Ethiopians. Well, Ethiopians, the word Ethiopian is not used for people of Ethiopia. The reason why Ethiopia gets that name, Ethiop means burnt skin. People of burnt skin would generally call them Ethiopians. So it's not referring to Ethiopia. Peter Martyr said they must have been shipwrecks. Lopez de Gomara said these blacks Balboa saw in the Indies were identical with the blacks we saw in Guinea. Rodrigo de Colmenares saw blacks. Captain of Balboa saw blacks east of the Gulf of San Miguel. Alphonse de Catafalque reported in his book, Study of Panama. L'Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg was the guy who went to Panama, said there were 2 distinct people in Panama. The Mandinga, black skin, and the Tule, red skin. The red skin would be the Native American. And Alphonse de Catafalque presents us with a map showing blacks in various places in early America. the Charus of Brazil, the Yamasee of Florida, and the Black Caribs of St. Vincent, pre-Columbian. Alonso Ponce cites them off Campeche in Mexico. River Palacio cites them off Tegucigalpa in the Nicaraguan-Honduran border. Ramon Pane speaks of them as the black gold traders. Fray Gregorio Garcia cites them off Cartagena, Colombia. A dozen Europeans, Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Columbus, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, Peter Martyr, Lopez de Gomara, Rodrigo de Colmenares, Alphonse de Catafax, L'Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, Alonso Ponce, River Palacio, Ramon Pane, Fray Gregorio Garcia, seeing things that are not there. Probably blacks are haunting their dreams. It's absurd. You cannot have 12 eyewitnesses to an event that never happened. And I have not just 12 eyewitnesses. That is just one piece of evidence. I have 12 pieces. So it's not just the eyewitnesses, the metallurgical evidence. That it was tested, they were found to be identical in the ratio of gold, silver, and copper alloys as spares being forged in African Guinea. 18 parts gold, 6 silver, 8 copper. How could you have identities like that? Then there's the linguistic identities, which I just mentioned. Saracolis and Inki, Gadzago, Vai, Mende, Kisikono, Pule went through half a dozen African languages to check out the word. And they're using the same bloody word that the Americans are using. How is that possible? If it was a European, you only need one piece of evidence. I'm giving you 7. How could you deny that? And it doesn't stop there. There is the botanical evidence. Take the banana. We use the word banana for the banana, but that's not the African word for the banana. The word for the banana is bakoko in Africa. Banana is an Arab word. The Africans didn't have bananas. The bananas were introduced into Africa by the Arabs very early, and they have a different word for it. They do not have banana. They have bakoko. I have checked the bakoko word because they found bananas in Peru. Peru didn't have bananas. Pre-Columbian Peru is not supposed to have, they didn't have original bananas. The banana, the reason why we found the banana is because when they buried their dead, they would have ceremonies every year, the year of the day of the death, and they would put fruit in the grave, and among the fruit they put in the grave was the banana. And they do not originally have bananas. That has been checked out. It's only found in these graves. If they were eating the banana, we'd find other kind of evidence. And the word for the banana in Peru is the same as the word for the Africans have. We call it banana, but the Africans call it bakoko. So I started checking out the words in Peru. How did this banana appear? They don't have bananas at that time in South America. And found in Galibi it's bakuku, in Oyapock it's bako, in Oyampi it's these are all South American languages. In Oyampi it's bako me, and Tupi is bako ba, because pa and pa are interchangeable plosives. And in Apiacus it's bakowa, in Turi it's baho. So you have bakoko, bakuku, bako, bako me, bako ba, baho. Can't happen unless you have a connection, a very early connection. And then comes the oceanographic evidence, because most people say, here is Africa and here is America. How could the Africans cross? They only have canoes that Tarzan can turn over in the movies. But that's another myth again. First of all, there are two things here that they did not take into account. I lived on the river. My father was superintendent of road and river transport over an area that was as large as Scotland and Wales. I grew up in the river. And my mother and father were divorced. That was the first divorce in our country, recorded divorce in our country. They later remarried. That was the first recorded remarriage in our country. I wouldn't advise you to do it. It doesn't work. But anyway, they did it in order to save the children, and I am grateful to them, but they suffered. But anyway, to come back, you have this knowledge. I had this knowledge of currents because I used to swim 3.5 miles across the water to the air base. That was a big thing to show how, You are, you know, boys are like that. They're always playing their ass, trying to prove they're strong. Several of us drowned. So you could see what I mean by playing the fool. Anyway, I used to swim across the river, so I was extremely strong. And I knew about currents, because most people think the river is just like that. No, the river is alive. In certain parts of the falls in Guyana, the water is running as fast as a motor car. You don't have to have an engine. You have to know how to steer. Or it hits you against the rock and you're blown to pieces. The water moves as fast as a motor car. And in those waters, they do not move as fast as a motor car, the great rivers, but they move with force and take you places. And we have discovered 3 currents of Africa that take you automatically to America. There's one of the Cape Verde, one of the Senegambia coast, one of the southern coast of Africa. Once you are caught in those currents, you have to come to America unless the fish get you first. Whether you have an engine or not, the water is the engine. It's very powerful. And it's exactly where those currents end that we find the African presence. It goes to Mexico. It goes into other parts of America. It goes to Brazil. They've recently found, listen to this, look at the lies involved here. They recently found an African Negro woman. I say Negro because not all blacks are Negro. The African has 6 faces. For example, if you're in a dry African climate, you have a narrow nose. If you're in a wet or moist African climate, you have a broad nose. Most people don't know that. They don't know they have 6 types of African. There's the Nilotic type. They're all black. But they have the Nilotic type, the so-called true Negro type, all sorts of types they have. And I have in my new book the faces of the various types. And all of these types appear. But what is most extraordinary is the evidence we have of their ships. They had the ships. Thor Heyerdahl became world famous because he got the Baduma people on Lake Chad to build a boat that the Africans built before Christ. Thor Heyerdahl used the boat the Africans built before Christ. They showed him the model. They built the boat. He financed it. A boat they were using before Christ, and it crossed the Atlantic successfully. Heyerdahl told me, Van Sertima, we did not even have to fish. The fish jumped on board. Because in those currents are millions of fish, millions. And it wasn't just Heyerdahl. Alain Bombard also tested African boats. And they made it in less time than Vespucci. You have several, if you study the work I have done in the new book, Early America Revisited, you see these guys made it in less time than the European boats because of their knowledge of the currents. And they're not only currents off the Cape Verde, off the Senegambia coast, off the southern coast of Africa that take you to America. They're currents that spin you back towards Africa. We have an evidence of a boat, American boat, Native Americans landing in Africa 62 BC. There were 7 in the boat because it was an accident. They were taken to because the currents that not only take you there and pull you back. We don't have any evidence of Europeans doing that. We have it in Native American 62 BC. That is in my book, They Came Before Columbus. And apart from this oceanographic evidence, there's the navigational evidence. That's the boats. The Africans had the boats. The Africans built the boat for Heyerdahl. Heyerdahl became world famous about how he crossed the Atlantic. He didn't build the boat. It was Africans who built the boat for him, a boat they had used before Christ, the Baduma people on Lake Chad. It's in my new book, Early America. You would see the boat. The Africans built it. They could easily have crossed. And when you cross, the current actually takes you into the Caribbean, to Brazil or parts of South America, to Mexico, etc. Recently, listen to this, look at the cheating going on, look at the profound dishonesty of scientists. They found a Negro woman in Brazil, where the currents come from Africa, the Caribbean, Brazil, etc. They found a Negro woman in Brazil, 12,500 years old. That is even before the Native Americans. Now, Negroes always came from Africa, but it was so embarrassing that they suggested, yes, it's a Negro, but it came from Asia. Now, this is Brazil, you know. Brazil is on the Atlantic coast. To come from Asia, you have to get a boat that's going to take you all the way to South America, and then you have no car. Currents may help you to get to South America, but then you have to walk to Brazil. Then you get the tip, you have to walk all the way to Brazil to drop your skull. And the New York Times ran the story like that, you know, thinking, and they even changed the name. When they found this Negroid woman, they call her Louisa, because the first human we found on Earth is Lucy, an African. So they call her Louisa. But when it got to the New York Times, they call her Valherbe or Malherbe or something like that. And she comes from Asia. Negroes don't come from Africa anymore. They come from Asia. You find them in the wrong time, in the wrong place. Jesus Christ, I mean, how far can you take this nonsense? It is absurd. And you find also skeletal evidence. Listen to this, because I have to be very careful here. I was in 2 intelligence services in the world, the Guyana Intelligence Service and the British Intelligence Service, and you're not supposed to tell secrets. So I have to say this in a way that shows that I don't know nothing. Okay. They found 2 African skeletons in the United States Virgin Islands at Hull Bay, St. Thomas. These skeletons were found in a strata or layer of earth which is datable 1250 AD, 2.5 centuries before Columbus. But they could not date the bones. Something strange had entered the bones of these skeletons. Now, I know why something strange had happened, why something strange had entered, because of something that was done in that area, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. All I could say is not far from Cuba, and Cuba was giving us some trouble, and we had to tell Castro, come on, we're the world power, so don't play the fool with us. We'll teach you a lesson. That's all I'm allowed to say. But I went down to the Virgin Islands when I heard about these skeletons. And they promised, I shamed Vesalius, the archaeologist of the island. I spoke to the whole university, a big crowd, shamed him. He said he'd allow me to see the skeletons. Come there by 12 o'clock the next day. I arrived 10 to 12, raced across the island. Arrived at 10 to 12. The door was locked. Well, I am a very nice person. But when I get angry, I'm not very nice. So I ran at the door, wham! Shook the place. The police came on. What are you doing here, sir? I was invited here. You know the police, don't you see the place is closed? Yes, sir, but it's very strange that it should be closed. I was invited here. I was to come here by to move along, sir, or we have to arrest you. Well, I moved along. But fortunately for me, friends on the island who'd heard of my interest, and I'd spoken to the university there, they took me to a rock pool at St. John. That was St. Thomas where they found the skeletons. They took me to a rock pool at St. John's in the Virgin Islands. And they wanted to show me carvings of tropical animals. When I saw these carvings, I said, no, that is not evidence. Those tropical animals are in both places, both Africa and America. But as I was preparing to leave, the light of the sun shone on the rock, just above the rock pool. And I looked down and I saw a strange formation, dots and crescents. And I said, nature cannot do that. Nature cannot do that. It's because it will wash against the rock and it may cause a kind of cleavage in the rock, but it can't make perfect curves and dots and curves. It cannot do that. So I went down there and I cleaned the rock and I photographed it. I sent it to various parts of the world. I sent it to Africa. So someone in Africa, in Ghana, said it's the Gainame sign. And I said, send me evidence of the Gainame sign. And he sent it to me. And I said, no, no, no. Don't waste my time, man. That doesn't look anything like the Gainame sign. But I kept taking it wrong. And eventually, Dr. Barry Fell of Harvard, he's dead now, he'd written America BC. The New York Times ran 3 pages attacking me and Fell. I brought out, they came before Columbus. Barry Fell brought out America BC. He was dealing with other kinds of contacts. I was dealing with African contact. And New York Times ran 3 pages attacking me and Fell. They wouldn't even allow anybody in America. But fortunately for me, Dr. Clarence Wine, the oldest of American archaeologists, who'd been on the place where they found the stone heads with African faces, he wrote a marvelous essay on me. And because he was the oldest American archaeologist, they couldn't kick out his essay. So he said, I am absolutely convinced of the soundness of Van Sertima's conclusions. So in spite of all that, it came through. But look now, the skeletons, we cannot move on. Because recently we have another clown who's entered the Virgin Islands, and he's saying now that even though they're in strata 1250 AD, these skeletons could not be, could not be Africans because they have, could not be proper Africans because they have something teeth, they have some problem with the teeth. And Africans cannot have that problem because they are some sort of nonsense, but they don't eat certain things, so that they, the most absurd, I find it difficult to remember it because it is so absurd, I do not know how long I could keep it in my golden brain. These people are awesome. Look, what incredible evidence. If I did not find that script which was translated, plunge in to cleanse yourself. This is water for ritual ablution before prayer. Because Barry Fell says, it's Libyan, so I sent it to the Libyan Department of Antiquities. And they came up with the translation. Plunge in to cleanse yourself. This is water for ritual ablution before prayer. And then comes a map. It's in my new book, a map of Brazil that shows independent black settlements in Brazil, pre-Columbian. And then comes the oral evidence in Mali. They speak of a king, Abu Bakari II, who wanted to cross the ocean because he felt there was land beyond. And he appears, the Mexicans report this strange black man in white robes appearing. And it is also reported by the Arabs because Mansa Musa went to Cairo. He's a Muslim, and he went to Cairo. When he was in Cairo, he talked about, they asked him, what happened to your brother? And he told him that he wanted to cross the ocean and he never came back. And it's recorded by the Arabs in Al-Kashandi and the Masalik al-Absar, Fir Mamalik al-Amsar, so that's the documented evidence. Then there's the iconographic evidence. So I've presented 12 pieces of evidence: eyewitness accounts, metallurgical evidence, linguistic evidence, botanical evidence, oceanographic evidence, navigational evidence, skeletal evidence, epigraphic evidence, the script, cartographic evidence, a map, oral evidence of the Mali Griers, documented evidence, the Arabs, the Al-Kakashani, the Masalik al-Absar, Fi Mamalik al-Amsar, and the iconographic evidence. That is, you look at my book and you're going to see sculptures of Africans. There's everything. The texture of the hair, the shape of the faces, lips, noses, everything. And one of the things they found, and I'm not going to talk about it at this point in the lecture later, they found something that is so astonishing that they are utterly embarrassed. And that was found after. But here is the 1310, 1311 journeys where I present 12 pieces of evidence. I did not know of an even earlier visit because that is what I presented to Congress, and they decided to delete the word discovery. So let me make it quite clear. Truth Trust that the ground will rise again.